Okay, right, welcome all to the Change Committee. We have I'll remind you of the protocol, which we're all very familiar with. Paul's already put his hand up. You're just waving, right? If you want to come in, stick your hand up. Please try and minimise the use of the chat bar. And if you can introduce yourselves when you do want to speak to help with identification and minute taking, etc. We have a couple of apologies for absence: Brian Baberstock and Ross Haggart. We also, I'll just mention, Angelina, I know you have to go at 1 o'clock. We have extended the meeting to 1:30 because of the size of the agenda. Obviously, I'll do my very best to finish before then, if at all possible. That takes us on then to consideration of and decision on any items to be taken in private. As you can see, there are a couple of items in the private session. And has anybody got anything else they want to flag? Nope. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 4, declaration of interests. Anything under this? Nope. Good. Thank you very much. That takes us on then to the minutes of the previous meeting. It was held on the 3rd of February. I'll do the usual and go through these page by page if you can call out anything that you want to mention. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. All happy? Okay, so we shall take them as an accurate minute of the meeting of the 3rd of February. That takes us on to the action log. Heather?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Heather Gregg, Board Support Team. So it's just to confirm on the rolling action log that we have 7 actions in total, with 1 which is marked as completed and 5 actions that are still outstanding from the 3rd of February meeting. So just to confirm that the committee are content with the position statement updates against them and for the 1 action to be removed as proposed.
Can I, Nick Barr, on you go.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Nick Barr, board member. Fiona, you might have been, or Chair, you might have been going to mention this. The last item on the rolling action log, 11.2.2, I don't recall this. However, I may be wrong. My memory is failing. Could somebody just explain a little bit? Should that have been Brian Baverstock and Fiona, or?
So what I was going to say is, actually, I think this has been superseded in terms of the work that's ongoing with the risk templates and the conversations that we're having with Andy in terms of risk. So from my perspective, I think this action can be closed. Everyone happy with that?
I'm happy. I'm happy to close it. Yes, or the other option would have been perhaps to remove it as entered in error. But but I'm happy to close it if that's the case.
No, I think it's been superseded, and I think you're right. I think it probably was Brian. It's quite some time ago actually that we had the conversation. But
fine, okay, that's great.
Okay, let's close that one then, and that takes us on to SMB, and there is one very small, well, not small, one action on there, which I don't think. Paul, I don't suppose you want to say any more about it, really. It's self-explanatory.
Absolutely,
Okay.
Chair, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I don't think there's anything for us to dig into on that one. So that takes us then to the agenda item 8, which is the value added statement. Apologies for that being a bit of a late paper. That was stuck with me. I had a bit of writer's block as far as that was concerned. Has anybody got any comments on the value added statement? Angelina.
Thank you, Chair. Angelina Foster, board member and member of the Change Committee. Feel free to call me a picky old bat, but I did have one. Thought. It's in section 4, a second paragraph across lines 4 and 5. In particular, the committee will be seeking scrutiny and assurances. I just find that assurances in the plural sounds a lot more flabby than assurance singular. To me, has a slightly more, just a bit more of an edge to it. So I did try to give warning that it was an extremely picky point, but if you wanted to drop the S, that was where I was basically getting to.
Very good point. Agree entirely, and don't minute the picky old bat part of that. No, completely agree with you. Assurances, and that would be our normal language. So yeah, we will remove the S. Any other comments on the value added statement? All happy? Excellent, good. Thank you very much. Now, over to agenda item 9, change portfolio major projects. Gillian.
Thanks, Chair. Gillian Buchanan, Portfolio Office. So you have got the covering paper for the dashboard, and as usual, the changes are highlighted in yellow for ease of reading. I'm not going to go through it because I'll assume you'll have read it. And just to highlight as well that we have got a change request for the West Asset Resource Centre. Ian Morris won't be here today because he's had to go to a meeting at Emergency 1, but as we discussed, this is a pretty straightforward change request. It's just the governance process. We have Safe and Well, a change request and an updated dossier, and Ali Perry's here to talk to that. And we also have the Youth Volunteer Scheme Evaluation Report, and again, Ali Perry will be able to talk to that. So that's your dashboard, and I'm happy to take any general questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Gillian? Stuart.
Yeah, thanks, Gillian. I think the report is absolutely fine, but I suppose it was an observation, and it may be stating the obvious, but every project has got a resource and skills challenge attached to it.
Yeah.
And many of them, as far as I'm understanding, are related to resource constraint within pod. And I suppose my question is really, are we seriously challenging the priority for the areas that we're requesting input from? Because if you're sitting in an area getting information requests or resource requests from a number of different projects, it's actually very difficult to assess yourself what the priority is. And we obviously run the risk of trying to do 20 things and achieving nothing rather than trying to raise the risk at 5. So it's just, I don't really expect, well, there maybe is an answer to it, but it's more just a general observation, having sort of seen the whole sort of pattern before. But I think in that situation, the more focused we can be on information requests, the better.
In terms of, Stuart, just next time, remember to introduce yourself.
Oh, my apologies, Stuart Ballingo, board member and committee member. Apologies.
Okay, I noticed the same thing, that other than the asset projects, every single project is amber for resource. I think it's probably wider than pod. There's various comments throughout the papers in terms of the impact of the pension stuff, etc. So in my mind, there is clearly an overall resource issue, which I guess we've kind of been seeing coming for a while. So the question on prioritization is really well made. Paul, you had your hand up, but then Andy stuck his hand up. Will I go with Andy? Yeah, on you go, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Andy Main, Head of Function for the Portfolio Office. So, sure, it was just to come back on your point directly. I don't have an answer for you at the moment, unfortunately, other than to say that the observation made is well made. It's a common theme across the change portfolio. But I would also say, and Paul can jump in here, I think it's a common theme organisation-wide, even from an operational perspective as well. And I think there's so many facets, and we'll get onto it later on in the agenda with regards to the resourcing spotlight around the change portfolio and the number of capabilities that we know that we have to look to develop. Capacity planning comes into that mix as well, and how we can be a little bit more insightful around, you know, when new initiatives start to come down the pipeline or in-flight initiatives, how can we make sure that we are resourcing them appropriately and proportionately to continue to deliver on the commitments that we've made, or to ensure that before we initiate anything new, that we are in a position in which we can take that work on as an organisation. We're not in a position yet where we've developed anything, Stuart, but please be assured that we are well aware of it, and it's something that we do need to address.
Thanks, Sandy. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Paul Stewart, Assistant Chief Officer and Director of Service Development. Yeah, it's just to broaden that out slightly, Chair, and in order to try and provide some feedback, Stuart, on the resourcing challenge. I raised this at a previous meeting of the Senior Management Board with regards to the consistency of that box, if you like, that resource box being amber and red across a number of projects. And the HR department, or pod, have been looking into this. There are several aspects impacting on the resource challenge. It's not just the capability of our HR team to facilitate the actual process, but there are some challenges around the skills availability for specific aspects. So if we talk about ICT, or we talk about specialist roles within project management, etc., we are seeing some challenges around the structures currently within the service and how we can best compete in that market because of the current job rates that we pay, etc., and also the buoyancy of the job market in specific areas. So there is a challenge internally from the organisational point of view that's been looked into from an HR perspective around the process and the facilitation of the resources, but there are also some wider challenges across the organisation in relating to pay rates and the buoyancy of the job market and recruiting specialist roles that may not be widely available across the job market. So just trying to provide a little bit more context around that, and hopefully that's helpful. Thanks,
Yeah.
Chair.
Yeah, I guess, Stuart, I don't know if you want back in, but yeah, I guess the question is how that feeds into the overall prioritisation, and we've talked about that a number of times in this forum and in lots of other forums, and I guess we've got a bit to go in terms of getting our arms around how to effectively prioritise with all the necessary information, because we do have some information gaps. So that's certainly an aspiration to get to a better place on prioritisation. Curtis?
Thanks, Chair. Curtis Montgomery, Centre of Excellence Manager. So I just wanted to really come in with a couple of points on that. One of them is really around about the strategic positions. So at the moment, what we're trying to do, to just add to what Andy was saying, was really create a link to the organisational strategy, which hopefully will set out the priorities of which capabilities we need to deliver and when, and then we'll spin out the projects from that roadmap. But I think the other part of it is really doing a bit more of analysis around about the business case when it first starts the pipeline into the portfolio, because one of the things that isn't really happening at the moment is that kind of impact assessment that outlines the key roles that you need to actually deliver the change. So if we can do that in a more regular way, either in an annual planning cycle or a quarterly cycle, then that will give you a bit of a projection on resources, which you can then start to overlay and have a bit more central coordination. So I think there's probably a few different facets that point to the root causes, but actually we're working on pretty much all of them at the moment, I think.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, and the point around that kind of upstream impact assessment is well made. Anything else on that specific piece? No? Okay. That then, we're still on 9.1, but West Arc, Gillian's obviously described that. I think it's a bit of a catch-up governance piece, but Paul, do you want to say a few words about the West Arc change request? Paul, are you speaking to the West Arc change request?
No, sorry, I wasn't intending to. I thought there would be someone here to speak to that. So
All right, Ian's not here. I mean, it's straightforward. I'm happy with it. I know it's just a governance, not just, but it's a governance catch up. So unless anyone has any challenges, I'm happy just to, yep, that's fine. Yep, that's good. Safe and Well and the Youth Volunteer Scheme, Ali Perry, you're our man for them. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So Ali Perry, Head of Prevention and Protection for Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. Good morning, everyone. The change request in front of you, I'll talk briefly to the paper and then open up for questions. So the pilot was due to be undertaken in October 2021 to March 2022. We've had a number of delays, and many of those were due to the impact of Omicron, if you can remember, over that period on resources affecting our ability to engage with partners. The paper references the ICT system, Safe and Well management system. This is the cornerstone, to be honest, of the Safe and Well project. And we've been working very closely with ICT, and we've developed what we think is a really, really good system. It's quite user friendly and is aimed to reduce the impact on the front line. So that is in place. We also have a progressive web app, which is an app that can be used across a number of systems. It's not crucial to the completion of the project, but there are some delays in finalising the delivery of that progressive web app, and that impacted the project dashboard you saw before, showing quality as amber, purely because it's part of, or was a planned part of the project, and we're hoping to be able to deliver that in the project timeline. It's not essential to the delivery, to be honest, of the project. It's a, if you like, a nice to have. It's a fallback for areas where the management system that we've developed can't be used effectively. So the change request, there are a number of other matters in the change request. We've not been able, because of the delays, to complete a number of visits we would have liked to complete to give us a good evidence base. So we're seeking to conduct more visits during that timeline. Also with partner agencies clearly affected by Omicron and coming out of the COVID period, going through that recovery and reset program that we are, we've had to bring them online. We've currently got 3 partners online. We're working with another 12, and they require to be trained on the system, brought up to speed, and talk through it. So there's a bit of work to be done there as well. So I've looked for an extension of the project timeline from April to August 2022. If we look at 7.3, it talks about the elements that were undertaken during this extension. So pilot key elements clearly up until July, evaluate the Safe and Well pilot in July to August, and then present the findings of the pilot and seek further direction at the end of August 2022. I should say what we do intend to do is bring the project into business as usual. At that stage, there will still be work to be done. So the current pilot is taking place amongst our community action teams. And that's a select number of community action teams, including in WIOS, which is really positive. We're looking to broaden that out, but the options that we'll be presenting following the completion of the pilot will be whether we roll that out more widely among all the CAT teams, what the timeline or process might be if we seek to introduce it to our VDS and hold time colleagues. And that will, when that's done, that implementation plan will require further work, and we may look at the resourcing of that at that stage. But basically, that's why the change request is before you, due to demands on the project. because of the impact of Omicron and other delays over the Christmas period, we think we can do an effective pilot if we get the extension as requested up until August.
Thanks, Ali. Just before I open it up, is it that under 7.3 when it stage 4 date to be confirmed pending direction? Pending direction from whom? Is that SLT or?
Sorry, which section is that, Chair?
7.3 stage 4.
Oh
it
yes,
mentions
seeking direction. Yeah, so what we intend to do is at the completion of the pilot, undertake the evaluation and develop an options paper moving forward, and that will go through the SMB governance process and up to SLT to seek direction.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Does anyone get any questions for Ali? Nick?
Hi, Ali. Thanks very much. Very clear paper. I don't have any problem with the request for the extension. This is more just a point of information from me. It dawned on me that I'm merging two committees here. Apologies, Chair, but it dawned on me that perhaps I'm not as familiar as I should be as a member of the Service Delivery Committee about the finer detail operationally of this. So therefore, I think in conjunction with yourself and Stuart, I think it would be a good idea to discuss this in a bit more detail in the Service Delivery Committee. But and who's the project lead for it? I know you're the overall project lead, but who's the person managing it?
Okay, so currently it's Lynn Gow, Group Commander Lynn Gow, and prior to that it was Kev McCusker, and they've done a fantastic job, and I meant to reference them during the delivery of the paper. They've worked really hard. It's engaging across functions. It's engaging with partners. It is really challenging, juggling all those balls, as we know. And both of them have done a superb job in bringing it to where it is.
No, that's great. Thanks very much. And that's all from me. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Nick.
Chair, if I can come in.
Sure.
Sorry, just on the point about going to the Service Delivery Committee, I recently had a presentation from the team on the Safe and Well system, and we could do an abridged version of that presentation to the Service Delivery Committee. So I'll work with Stuart to bring that to the group.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Youth volunteer scheme sorry, I should say for the minute that change request is agreed. We're all comfortable. So moving on to the youth volunteer scheme, and you again, Ali.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I've actually got Ruth Cairns has joined the call. Ruth is a youth volunteer scheme national officer. Ruth's going to talk to the evaluation. I think what I'd like to say at the start is we launched this in February 2020, and we all know what happened in March 2020. So it's been a really challenging period for the youth volunteer scheme, and I hope you've had a chance to look through the evaluation. From my perspective, it's an area of the business that punches above its weight. I think all our youth engagement work does that. Whenever I engage in forums outside the service, this is often seen as a jewel in the crown. It's hitting a lot of our objectives as an organisation. I was speaking at the Youth Volunteer Scheme Board recently, and we're talking about a launch of, or a proposed launch up in the Highlands. In fact, it was Shetland, and we're talking about the percentage of care experience young people that are coming on to the Youth Volunteer Scheme. So it's an area we add an awful lot of value to broader society. So I'm really proud of it. And Ruth has been heading that up, which is why I asked her to come here and talk to evaluation, because it reflects the positive work that she and her team have done. So
thanks, Ali. And I mean, I'm sure I speak for all of the committee and wider than that. This is a fantastic piece of work. And you should be, and we all are, I think, really proud of it. Ruth, welcome. Over to you.
Hey, Chair. Morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here this morning to share the Year 1 evaluation report with you. So as you can see behind me, my name is Ruth Cairns, and I'm the Youth Volunteer Scheme National Officer. So I coordinate the project across the country through the Community Safety Engagement team within P&P. If you've had a look through the report, I will give a disclaimer that I'm not going to go too in depth because the report is quite large. But just to give that overview and that sense of what we've learned from that first year and how we're going to take that forward. So it's covering the period February 2020 to April 21. As Ali said, we launched in the February, and then 2 weeks later we had that national lockdown. So the report is very different from what we originally imagined it would be when we were first developing the scheme. But it does look at what we were able to deliver despite the challenges that we faced. And the challenges were pretty much the same as everyone was experiencing during this time. So there was the digital challenge. In particular, we had a lack of digital skills or confidence in using different platforms. I'm sure many of you were using new platforms, and it was much the same for our young people and our adult volunteer instructors and the staff that were coordinating the local schemes. We also have quite a few rural units within the youth volunteer scheme. So again, poor digital infrastructure was an issue in terms of young people being able to get online and engage. And again, there's that digital fatigue. Young people were online for school all day and then not necessarily wanting to be online for something else later in the evening. And then mental well-being was one of the other main challenges. So as you can imagine, there was change in priorities for both our young people and for our adult volunteer instructors in terms of maintaining that suitable work-life balance, being able to look after their well-being, getting out in nature when they could, because obviously we're cooped up in houses the rest of the time. So we had these challenges, and because of the pandemic, all engagement during this period was virtual, and we delivered that through a range of digital means, both locally and at a national level. So there was a suite of resources created. There was virtual support and training that was given to our scheme coordinators, to our volunteer instructors, and there was also support in terms of the new units that we were trying to get up and running, looking at how to progress them. And despite the challenges faced in this first year, we were still able to evidence how we met those intended short-term outcomes set out in the evaluation plan. So those main objectives that we have within the programme, we also have those short-term outcomes that show how we're progressing. However, we'd say we did have to adapt some of the ways in which we measured these outcomes due to the significant change that COVID had on the delivery of YVS. So a lot of it was about observation or reporting from the young people, and we weren't able to do that because we weren't face-to-face. However, we were able to collect qualitative data, which was really important for this report, being able to tell that story of young people and the impact that YVS has had on them. So we held focus groups with youth volunteers, and we had an online survey with our volunteer instructors as well to see how it was impacting them. And through the evidence that we collected, young people told us that because of being part of YVS, they had increased their confidence and self-esteem, they had developed skills to participate in life learning and work, they had improved their communication, their problem-solving skills, and that they were supported in improving their health and well-being. So being able to evidence that we had achieved that despite all those challenges that we had was really, really positive. We did have the advantage that some of our schemes were from legacy youth engagement programmes that were similar to YVS, and they had transitioned through into that new programme. So we did have some young people that were engaged for a number of years before that transition. So we were able to include them as case studies to demonstrate the significant impact that being part of a scheme like YVS has had on them. And those young people were also instrumental in influencing the development of YVS, so what the syllabus looked like, what the uniform looked like. So having their input was really key for us. We also had contributions from our volunteer youth instructors, which explored why they wanted to be part of YVS and what they gained from it as well. So in future reports, we would like to explore that much more in depth. So due to the feedback that we gained through the process, we were able to look at what our main challenges were and turn them into positive learning opportunities. So the change to virtual delivery, pretty much everyone has been compelled to become more digitally competent, and that was very true for us. So we had to be more innovative, more creative in terms of how we were engaging with young people and our adult volunteers. And that has influenced the further development of the scheme. So we never imagined we'd be doing training online, for example, but part of our mandatory training package for our volunteers is mostly online now. And we're exploring other opportunities to do e-learning modules that's going to enhance all our volunteers' learning. So the report has really allowed us to tell the story of our youth volunteers and our volunteer youth instructors, their experiences over that first year. And as I said, it's flagged up some key points of learning for us, which are both positive and negative. From this learning, as you'll see in the report, we developed a set of recommendations, which I draw your attention to, and work has been underway to progress these. So what I would like to do is just share my screen quickly to show where we are currently with YVS. I think that would be of interest to you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a lovely colourful visual there. So as we're sitting right now, we currently have 7 schemes that we have launched face-to-face on stations. Let me know if I can zoom in. Might not be big enough there. Zoom in a wee bit more. So we got the go-ahead to get back on stations at the start of February. So we have 3 in that first quarter, and we've had another 4 in the last month being able to launch, which takes us up to a total of 7 across the 15 schemes. And that's a total of 89 young people that we're currently engaging with. We have a further 4 who are scheduled to have their volunteer instructor induction evenings or information nights for young people and their parents and carers. So that's those kind of forward steps to getting them launched in the next month or 2. And there's a further 4 who have a few more barriers and challenges that we're supporting them to get over them and get launched. We're hoping by the end of this summer. So ideally, all going well, we'll have our 15 schemes up and running by the end of the summer. And then we'll be looking at schemes 16 to 20. So there's a commitment from the service to look at a further 5 from that. And that would involve creating another half-time equivalent of my post, just in terms of capacity there. So that'll be work going forward towards the end of the year that we're looking at. I think that's hopefully shows you where we've come from, what we've had to deal with, and where we are now. I'm happy to take any questions as well.
Well, thanks, Ruth. That's I mean, it's just such a good story. One question from me: the 15. You mentioned 89 young people. Is that within the 15, or is that just the first 7?
That's the first 7.
So
yeah.
how many more are we likely to touch when we get to 15?
So, this means I need to do maths now. So the most that a scheme can have is 20 young people. At the moment, we're recommending schemes start up with about 10 or 12, just because we still are experiencing some COVID restrictions on stations. So depending on room numbers, etc.
Yeah.
Although Campbelltown recently they've got the ability, they've started up with 20. So ideally we would be hitting those big numbers. So across the 7, we would be looking at ideally 140 young people.
Okay.
But currently we're looking at more of an average of 70. So we're above that average at the moment for those 7, which is good. The new schemes, Kilmarnock and Kilwinning, they're sitting at 12 and 15 respectively. So I think the numbers are looking healthy at the moment. And those schemes that have started with lower, who've been delivering for a wee while, then we'll be looking at a further recruitment of young people for them.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Any questions for Ruth or Ali? Angelina.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question really, just a slightly wider observation, I think. But firstly, thank you both for the report, and that presentation was really uplifting. One of the cheerier moments in my week, I may tell you. It's great. So thank you for that. But as colleagues may know, there's quite a drive at the moment, principally from Scottish Government, for some of our larger public bodies in Scotland to recognise their potential to make a difference in their local communities beyond their stated core business. And the current jargon, which I'm not a particular fan of, but it is to max out their potential to be anchor institutions. That's the terminology that's being used. So my thought here, Ruth and others, is that, you know, if at some point SFRS were minded to formally pick up that challenge and begin to develop its own understanding of its potential as an anchor institution in Scotland and in local communities, then I think, getting to my point, this work would be a really important existing building block, because particularly with respect to the positive pathways element that you report, and your comments, Ruth, you know, clearly drew out that's exactly what the anchor institution concept is all about, trying to kind of make a difference to individuals and communities locally by just recognising some of the byproduct influence that a public service body can have. So just a thought there for maybe a future broader strategic discussion.
Thank you. That sounds really interesting.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Now, just to reiterate what I've said and what Angelina's just said, that a really good news story. Sorry, Ali, you want to come back in?
It was just on Angelina's comments there. I think you're absolutely spot on. It is something we'll look at, and I know myself that so much of the work that we do is undersold or hidden, and it's about bringing that forward. And I know Richard Whitton's done some work on partnership and highlighting the partnerships that are undertaken, and I'm working closely with Richard, and it is bringing these to the surface, and perhaps capturing under that banner would be really useful. So thanks for that.
Just thinking about that, Ali, are you happy to take an action to just look at this in a bit more in terms of what more we can do under the anchor institutions banner? You happy to take an action on that?
Of course.
Yeah, brilliant.
Delighted.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, thank you, Ruth. Really good, very well done, and thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Okay. That takes us on to agenda item 9.2, which is the People Training, Finance and Asset System Programme update. Paul, there you are.
Good morning, everyone. So you've got the update in front of you, but with your permission, I thought it might be an idea just to give you a bit more of a flavour of the programme blueprint that we've been working on before getting into some of the specifics of the particular project. So I can share my screen if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that would be helpful.
Just give me 2 seconds to find the... Oh, sorry, I'm getting an error message with sharing my screen. I'll try that again.
Okay.
Oh, this usually
technology
works.
Not playing.
Yes, it can't display current content. I'll just maybe share my desktop, then you can see all the mess that's on my desktop as well. Did that come through okay?
Yes.
Okay, that just means I can't see you anymore, so I'll just...
It's probably a blessing.
Likewise, potentially. So as I say, it was just to give you a bit of a flavour for the programme blueprint that we've been working on. It is only a starting point. We do have this published on the iHub for folk to take a a look at. I say it's a starting point, and it's something that we're going to be developing over the coming weeks and months to put a bit more detail into it when we're talking about specific processes and organisation technology, etc. Something that we need to build up into that future state operating model. The model itself, it's divided into 4 main areas: processes, organisation, technology, and information. It looks at the current state, then looks at the future state. So if I look first at the processes, the model looks to describe the old ways of working that we want to phase out and start thinking about the new ways of working that we want to introduce. There is quite a lot of detail on this, so don't worry, I'm not going to read this out. As I say, it is available on the iHub, and this is really, if you like, an aggregation of a lot of the examples that have been dropping in at previous change committee update reports, and as a result of all that analysis work that we've been doing. But I thought it would be worthwhile just highlighting some of the key points. And as I say, it's things that we've talked about quite a bit at previous committees. So in terms of processes, we know that we've got they're highly configured to what we perceive as unique requirements. They're highly manual. We know that the processes are very off-system working, and that those processes activities tend to be concentrated at the lower end of the value add spectrum. We know that our processes are a bit ad hoc and a bit decentralised, and that they're not designed specifically with the customer in mind, and there's that perception out there that this process is somewhat self-serving. We know that our processes aren't necessarily consistent, and that they do vary from area to area, whether that's STA or LSO or potentially even station to station. Processes aren't necessarily managed end-to-end within systems, but overall, we know that our process maturity, particularly within the scope of PTFES, is not particularly high, and it's variable. So again, just highlighting some of the key points from that future state. We've explained how we want to adopt standard models of processes, and that those processes are just digital out the box. There's no if, buts, or maybes. They just are, and you don't need to do that manual processing. More than that, though, we don't allow that manual processing. But in the future state, the process activity is concentrated where it adds more value. But our processes are just more centrally managed, more controlled, and more focused on getting the customer experience right first time. Processes are on system end to end, but we're starting to develop that ethos of continuous service improvement when it comes to processes, and that we're starting to develop and mature our processes over time. So that's just a bit of a feel for some of the thoughts in terms of processes. And again, just to emphasise, this is a starting point. We need to take this forward and develop it into that future state or future state operating model. The model also looks at organisation, and this touches on some of the culture changes, some of the people changes that we need to be thinking about as well, and also the support and training that our people will need to enable that. So again, there's quite a lot of detail here that I'm not going to read, but just focus on some of the key points. And again, things we have discussed in the past, that in effect, what we've done is replaced paper with spreadsheets or something similar. A lot of that activity is very transactional based. We identify lots of single points of failure. So if someone's off or somebody's off on holiday or whatever, then you've got a little bit of a wait till that process is kicked off. There's a bit of a kind of an ethos or a culture of getting somebody else to do it for you. So that's something that we've identified, and that the service level agreements generally aren't in place. It's not something that's thought about or talked about. I come from an ICT background, and service level agreements are something that are a bit more well known. You may like or dislike the level of service that you get under that particular SLA, but at least the concept exists. And employees don't generally rate the service we're delivering. We did a survey on the iHub, and out of 10, we asked people to rate their experience of the processes and systems that are offered. We got 4.8 out of 10, which isn't a great score, and certainly room for improvement. In terms of how we would move that forward, we need to be thinking about the support and training that our people need to allow them to move up or move away from that focus on transactional activity. Be thinking about what type of teams do we need in the future, and that principle of self-service, and making sure that we embed that across the organisation. And I think that's something that might be a bit of a challenge. People are used to just getting someone else to do it for them. So while we say self-service and kind of perhaps the default position is, well, that's a good thing, people might be resistant to it if it means they're having to do more of that process themselves. Some of the other things we want to be thinking about, that customer service ethos and making sure that we're still cyber confident, and we are now, and that's something we need to maintain in the future. Third part of the model is around technology. I think it's important to stress that technology is only one part of the model, so that the programme and the projects within it aren't just about the technology. But when it comes to technology, we're thinking about the hardware, the networks, the software, all of the things that we need. Again, a lot of detail, but some of the key points. We know that we've got a mix of on-premise and off-premise systems and public cloud, private cloud. We've spoken at length at previous committees about the level of integration, and when I was speaking to SLT and Programme Board, I did use the word, it's an embarrassing level of integration that we have currently, and it's for 2022. It is quite breathtaking, the amount of retyping that's going on. There's little examples of self-service, but it's not particularly consistent. The example we were thinking about there was where you can apply as a support member of staff, you can apply for annual leave online, which is great, but that facility is only there for 10% of the staff. For the remaining 90% of staff, there's a greater or lesser extent of paperwork involved, or phoning or speaking to line managers to apply for leave. Automation, artificial intelligence, not embedded in the organisation particularly. And we've spoken about those technical workarounds that just permeate all of the processes, whether it's Excel, Mintex, etc. We've seen lots of examples of that. In terms of where we go in the future, we've talked about public cloud, software as a service. So we don't have that cost of ownership and that risk of ownership. We're outsourcing that effectively to the suppliers. A much tighter integrated ecosystem of applications, giving people self-service, making sure that they trust it and that they believe in it, the confidence in self-service, confidence in automation, because it reduces the number of errors and they can see the benefits of it. Those technical workarounds, we look to eradicate them, and we look to make sure that that's consistent across the service, regardless of geographic location and type of device. Final part of the model is information, and this describes the data and information that we need to support that future model. So some of the key points there, we've spoken about data duplication, fragmented view of records. We looked at the last time round at the Change Committee, we looked at the training records. We know that key data isn't always available. We've spoken about sensitive data as an example. We collect that at the recruitment stage, but we don't keep it. We don't put it into a HR system, so we've got data gaps there. We've identified that there's the potential for security issues around how we're storing people data, financial data, and if that's sitting in spreadsheets and people's drives and people's OneDrives, etc., then that represents a security risk. But we're doing some data work just now, and what we're seeing is that there's a different level of understanding of the department's own data. Some departments have got a better grasp of what the data is than others, but we're trying to catalogue that just now, and record what our data is and what get an estimate what the quality of that data is. So in the future state, again, that manual re-entry, we don't need it and we don't allow it. And I've taken some of the words from the business intelligence strategy, talking about a data-driven organisation, a data-savvy organisation, and just wanted to echo some of those themes that are in other strategies in the organisation. So that was just I'll stop sharing. That was just a flavour for the blueprint that we've been been working on. I see it is only a starting point. We've got good feedback from Scottish Government Audit saying, yeah, that's fine, but don't think you're finished there. You've still got quite a lot of work to do to build that into a future state model. So in terms of some of the other elements that were in the written update, there's some information around the people payroll finance project, but I suggest I maybe leave that discussion till the session later on this afternoon. The only thing I wanted to say on that is we have gone through a Scottish Government audit, and at the previous change committee, I think there was a comment around these types of audits and potentially they might be superficial. It was anything but superficial. It was grueling. It was hard work. But I think in the end, even I was convinced it was actually worth it, and we have got some good recommendations that we can work on.
What kind of recommendations did they? Just high level, Paul. What did they come up with?
So I'll go into the detail later on the session this afternoon, but I think they identified good practice at project level. They liked some of the things we were doing in terms of stakeholder engagement, but they identified that we'd probably gone from defining a programme, dive straight into project. And they said that's good stuff at project, but we'll come back and think a bit more about the programme. So think a bit more about the hierarchy of business cases from programme to project, and be thinking a bit more about that blueprint and that future state, and also programme governance. So I'll go into a wee bit more detail at the session later on, and what they told us. But yeah, so that was just a feel for what they were telling us. So just briefly on the rostering project, which is kind of in the update, we're now looking to onboard team members from that, because it's got a much more operational focus. Then we are been impacted by some of the issues that might already have been discussed around pension remedy and availability and access to operational staff. But the analysis work is underway, focusing on processes, focusing on benefits and their pain points and their future ways of working. We've already established that we want to bring together that rostering for on-call and on whole-time officers, not see those as two separate and completely distinct functions anymore, and making sure that we're aligning to what the outcomes of the SDMP programme are in terms of future ways of working. We've started some market engagement with the potential suppliers last month. We had 12 suppliers who joined a session, and a further 7 suppliers have asked to come and talk to us one-to-one. There's some familiar names in there, like Sistel, like Gartan, who are some of our current suppliers, and they're also starting to provide us with a range of costs. So I will pause there for breath and see if there's any questions.
Thanks, Paul. Can I just ask one thing before? I can't see any hands yet, but the blueprint, which I think is excellent. What is the purpose? How are you actually going to use the blueprint? You're on mute. So sorry, I was just I seem to have lost all the faces. I'm only looking at myself, which is unpleasant. So the blueprint, it's like at that kind of starting point of what is the purpose of the overall programme. So define it in those 4 different areas of process, etc., etc. It helps us focus in on what we need to be thinking about the programme has to deliver. So that's we then need to take that a step further and start thinking about. So if we're talking about some of those ambitions around processes of being end to end, well, the next step is then to start looking at what some of those processes are and start to define some of them at a high level. Processes are generally kind of categorised in levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. We'll maybe think about levels 1 and 2. How does the rostering work? How does it interface with the people data? What are the touch points between it? So that's where we'll go next with it. And we're getting a lot of support from the portfolio office, from Andy and Curtis, in terms of how would we actually articulate that? How do we workshop that? Who do we need to speak to? What are the resources that we need to actually to develop a bit more detail around that? Okay. No, that's helpful. Thanks. Stuart.
Hi there. I'm having sort of gremlins and Teams. I don't. It's just that other people are just me. But Thanks for that, Paul. I've got an observation actually in that when we started out the programme, it came across to me as a solution for a number of issues.
Stuart has just frozen. Has anybody else got an issue with Stuart having just frozen?
Yep.
Yeah, he's
Yep.
frozen at mine as well, Chair.
Right, just give it a second and see if he defrosts. No, it's not looking hopeful. Curtis, would you like to come in and then we can bring Stuart back in when he rejoins?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Curtis Montgomery, Centre of Excellence Manager. I just really wanted to add to the good work that Paul's talked about in the blueprint, and really just give a bit more of an assurance around about how we're approaching the design of the future state, because what we're actually taking is an enterprise approach across those 4 domains that he talked about. So actually the blueprint's more than just a starting point, it's also the end point, and it sets out the roadmap to the future state and the endpoint with the newer change capabilities and transitional architectures in different states as you move towards that end state. So it covers the data domain, the technology architecture, the business process architecture, and also the organizational target operating model for the change as well. So really it's a holistic approach. So it's more than just a starting point and thinking about the processes. It's about that whole enterprise view. So just to give a bit more comfort.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you. Sorry, Stuart, you froze shortly after you started to speak.
So I don't quite know where I got to, but I think what I was basically saying was when the programme was first presented, I took it as a collection of projects that were addressing specific issues, rostering, etc. What comes across to me now is a programme that is a much more fundamental shift in organisational thinking and organisational culture and technology usage and all sorts of other things, which is a mile away, or could be a mile away from where we started. Is that a fair observation, or is it just me that's feeling that? And if it is a fair observation, why have we made that shift?
Paul, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I think you've hit a nail on a head there, Stuart. I think potentially when I started as well, I was thinking it's a collection of projects. That's that's how we tackle these things. And I think over the period, looking at the business, looking at the challenges we've got, if we continue to see it as a collection of projects that just deliver system replacement, system upgrades, then we'll be in the same situation in 5 years' time. I'll be talking to you about System X, but the challenges we've got with System X, because we haven't fundamentally addressed some of the problems that we've identified with our processes, with our data, with that culture, that mindset, for example, where I talked about there's a culture and a mindset of asking somebody to do it for you. So if you've got an HR query, or you've got a promotion pool that you need to deal with, where you get your admin person or your support person or your HR person to do it for you. So I think you're right. I think it is a shift. I think it's needed. I think the input from the Portfolio Office, input from the Scottish Government Audit, speaking to our programme board executives, I think they recognise that it needs to be a transformation rather than a collection of projects.
Thanks, Paul. Stuart, do you want to come back on that?
I do, but I won't, because it seems there's a much wider conversation in here.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Nick. Oh, sorry, Nick. Andy, I think Andy was before Nick. Was he? Did anyone else spot the sequencing?
No, Chair. Nick beat me to the punch.
Right. Okay, Nick, over to you. Thanks.
It's just building on Stuart's a little bit, noting Stuart's very final comment there about the wider conversation. Let's just rewind the clock a little bit back to that original meeting where I probably had a similar view to Stuart's, where It was a collection of things that needed to be addressed. I seem to remember there was a little bit of surprise from the committee as to the size of the project on that initial briefing. We sort of went, oh, blimey, crikey, this is going to be big. And then we listened to what had been said, and we had absolutely no complaints about what had been said. It was work that needed to be completed. Stuart's observation is similar to my own on this, that we now are pulling in some wider cultural IT security type stuff as well. Have we therefore gone back and revisited the original working parameters that we had on the original conversation, as in manageability, size, scale, achievability, etc.? Because when we had that, we had one hand saying that we were going to do X, Y, and Z, and the other one saying, yes, we can do X, Y, and Z now. And rightly, and I don't, this isn't a criticism, I just want to check we've done this, is what you're saying, Paul, seems to be really good, as long as it's fitting in a strategic roadmap and it's moving forward, which it sounds like it broadly is. But have we gone back and said, okay, what do we need to achieve this? Because what we don't want to do is embark on something now, sort of thinking to ourselves, it's the right thing to do, only to find that the right thing to do is actually going to take quite a lot more, disproportionately more effort to achieve in the long run. And therefore we get the whole red for time and resource, red for time coming up in the future. And I'm sort of just trying to extend our thinking now, based a little bit on various other projects that have gone on, quite major projects. And I just want to see how that bit of thinking could be applied now to this, and whether or not that actually is a broader conversation later on, as Stuart was indicating. Did that make sense?
Yep. Sorry, I was just taking some notes. Yeah, no.
Sorry, Paul. Can I just add to that? I think, and it does make sense, Nick. I sense, and I certainly feel that some words of caution are appropriate in terms of the scale and the complexity, and obviously the cost. So we absolutely will be having broader conversations about this, because it is, you can't argue that it's the right thing to do. Absolutely, it's very clear, in the blueprint paints a very attractive future. However, it is a beast, and I certainly would like to encourage thought being given to how we could chunk the beast, potentially, because to go full scale, yeah, I would have some serious worries about the risks associated with that, given learnings that we and others in the public sector in particular have had with trying to scope and implement large scale programs of this type. So but sorry, Paul, I'll let you respond.
Could I just add one
Sure.
sentence to what it is you said, is and a caution note as well about people hanging on additional modules onto this project.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, no, I certainly take on board the comments and the concerns, and I think the key thing there that I picked up here was about how we chunk it, and how we make sure that we don't bite off more than we can chew. I think that a lot of what we outlined in the blueprint there will take a long time to implement. Will deliver capability, but then realizing and embedding and making the benefits from that capability are going to take a long time. We're seeing it as identify the capability that's required, spec it, scope it, implement it, and then embed it and realize the benefits from it. We're not seeing it as a short-term thing, and I think that the programme board are quite understanding that that's that's what's required, and that it will take time to do that.
Yeah. Andy?
Thank you, Chair. Andy Main, Head of Function Portfolio. Yes to all of the above. Just to simplify, I think we find ourselves in this position as a result of some of the questions that Curtis and I have started to ask around the programme. Why are we doing this? What's the driver behind it? Is it purely a system replacement because we're coming to end of life with some of the systems, we're coming to end of contracts with some of the systems? And back to Stuart and Nick's point about it just felt like a collection of projects, and what Curtis and I are starting to challenge the programme board on is to take a benefits-led approach to what it is that we're trying to do. What are the needs of the organisation here? So we want to improve our ways of working, we want to integrate our systems, we want to drive efficiencies into how we operate. Back to your point, Chair, nobody argues that that's the right thing to do. But in terms of the magnitude of this programme and the way it's starting to scale is huge, and we'll touch on that in the next session, of course. So we have to be really careful in terms of how we structure the programme going forward, and what do we want to do on an incremental basis in terms of the capability and the value we want to drive into the organisation. Otherwise, what we go down that same pitfall of setting ourselves up for failure and not success. And I think Paul and the team have done a vast amount of work, fantastic so far. And now with Curtis and I coming in and working with the SROs directly as well, just to give you some assurance on that, we're starting to ask these questions about, okay, how might we move forward from here?
Yeah, no, that is good to hear. Angelina.
Thank you. So just building on some of that, and I'm not suggesting that this point should be explored now. I think I am, though, suggesting that it's one that we need to take a look at when we have this later and larger conversation. And it's this, when the definition of the strands of work was at its, let's say, its initial or earlier stages, then typically in these endeavours, what you need at the, so to speak, client end, you know, for the scoping, the procurement, etc., the speccing, is one set of skills. Take rostering. It's a semi-technical, quite specific set of skills. In truth, what we're now appear to be talking about is an entirely different set of intelligent client capabilities at the kind of, you know, masterminding center of this larger piece. And my view would be that some of the sorry tales that have befallen other organisations that I think our chair was alluding to, an element, I think, when you unpack where they went wrong, it was they didn't recognise the need to scale up their own intelligent client function to the level of capabilities required for the growing and higher stakes, more aggregate, etc. Thing that they found themselves scoping. So I'm just logging that we need to take a look at that. And please, I don't want anybody to hear any criticism in that. I'm coming from a kind of textbook place, you might say, rather than an SFRS set of observations.
Yeah,
so please, I don't want anybody to hear me implying that there's any deficit in the team. It's not that. It's let's learn from others' woes here.
Absolutely. And I would just emphasise that no criticism. We are at a stage in this programme where that is an extremely good point, and it goes without saying that, you know, the lessons learned elsewhere we must, and internally, we must constantly remind ourselves of. Andy, do you want to come back on that intelligent client piece?
I do, Chair, if that's okay, and the main head of function portfolio. Angelina, just to give some assurance around that, that very point that you've just made has been one of the recommendations that's went right back to the SRO and the programme team around what are the skill sets that and the capabilities that we need right now when it comes to the definition of the programme and what it is that we're trying to do. So, for example, without going into detail, enterprise architecture type skills and business analysis skills are absolutely key, and one of the areas that we've observed over some of our current in-flight projects that may have been an organisational gap that we have to think about, because we don't want to repeat the same challenges that we've had before. So just to give you some assurance that that is some feedback going back into the programme board.
Okay.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you. Curtis?
Thanks, Chair. Curtis Montgomery, Centre for Excellence Manager. I think really just again adding to Andy's point, I think this is what I would refer to in textbook terms out of MSP as an emergent programme. So what I mean by that is it started off as one thing, and it became clear as we started to look under the covers that there were lots and lots of things that didn't make sense and were disjointed in legacy systems and processes. So I guess it's like anything, when you go and look at under the bonnet of a car and find additional problems, you want to address them. So I think in this particular programme, it's becoming clearer that there's a lot more work to be done simply because end-to-end business processes don't join up. So Paul and the team have been working to uncover and analyse what those are. And we're actually taking some time out on Friday as a group to then go away and start to workshop the structure of the programme in a bit more detail. Need to fill within the programme, and Andy's point about enterprise architecture is just one of many, because you'll need subject matter experts across different domains. You'll need subject matter experts within teams across SFRS. So the intention is to create some kind of programme preparation plan that outlines the who, the what, the why, and the when before we even go into the next phase of the programme to go into delivery. And that will help us set out a bit more of a roadmap and timescales and a phased approach to delivering the capabilities, which will be really key to making sure we don't bite off more than we can chew in one go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Nick?
Chair, thank you. I don't want to prolong this longer than necessary, and we're probably where we need to be with this comment now. But could I just ask one question, probably of Andy or Curtis on this? Is there a point at which we draw a line in the sand and we say this is the scope of the project? Because what you're talking about there is an emerging project. What we don't want is a continually emerging project. I can understand there being minor growth in particular elements, fine. But what we can't really sustain is something which is just grows and grows and grows, and there never seems to be an end point on it. Is there a point at which we could look forward to that? Speaking from a non-project manager expert, by the way.
Sorry, I don't know who wants to. Paul, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come back on that one, or Andy?
Yeah, the point I would make there is that the programme will have a finite lifespan, but the benefit realisation of that will continue post-programme, so that the programme will deliver what it needs to deliver. We'll be clear about the scope of it, but some of the work will continue beyond the programme. So I guess you may see that elongate, but that's required and necessary.
Andy?
Thanks, Chair. Andy, head of function portfolio. Nick, yes, is the simple answer to that.
Good answer. Okay, Curtis, I don't know if you want to come back in, or you just still have your hand.
No, it's another. It was really just to answer. The textbook answer will be yes, because we'll split the programme into 3 phases: definition, design, and delivery.
Okay, right. Thank you all. Can I just reiterate, and particularly as you go into the session, you mentioned that you maybe turn the volume up in terms of thinking about how this can be bite-sized chunked, very technical term, to try and make it doable and lower risk. So I would absolutely give you the committee steer to think about how we could do this in smaller bits. Thank you very much, all. Can I suggest we take a 5-minute comfort break? We're running a wee bit behind, so if we can trot through item 10 as much as you can, Andy, that would be appreciated. But if we could come back at 11:20. Thank you. Thanks all for coming back so promptly. I think there's still a couple of people to join. Okay. Agenda item 10. Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Janine, Head of Function Portfolio. I'll go through this quite quickly and just summarise where we are with the internal audit report and just invite any questions that committee members have. So the final report has now been received from ASETS with my review included as part of that for accuracy. That now sits that report with the Financial Director, John Thompson, who will look to take that to the next formal SLT, which will be in June. And then the route for governance after SLT, once that's been reviewed, is ARAC, and I believe there is an ARAC towards the end of June as well. I think it may well be the 28th. What I would submit, Chair, Stuart, come in there. What I would submit for consideration, Chair, is rather than waiting for the next change committee meeting and that cycle, it may be a suggestion to circulate to the change committee members along with when it's making its way to ARAC, perhaps
yes, please.
Conversation with Brian, but happy to do that. I think broadly speaking, from a few salient points and insights around the report itself, nothing that comes as a surprise that is not an accurate reflection of our current state, is what I would say. The lead auditor and myself did have a meeting prior to the actual field work, and the purpose for that was for me to actually preempt what I thought the auditors were actually going to uncover. Having been through this many times before, the members will typically know that these reports are binary in nature. You either have the capability or you don't have the capability, and there's not much cognizance within it about the work that is under development at the moment. So as committee members, don't be surprised when you see the outcomes of that. But we'll touch on some of the work that's currently underway within the function later on today. However, with that said, the encouraging part of the audit is that in alignment to our own roadmap, the sequence of activity that we are working on at the moment is largely in line with the recommendations that the auditors have made. So we will continue to go down that pathway, which is pretty good. So that's really the kind of summary findings of it, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that any members have.
Thanks, Andy. And we'll take a specific action for you to send it round at the same time as ARAC, if that would be really helpful. And good to hear that there were no surprises, and well done for the the preempting. Any specific questions for Andy on that? No? Excellent. Good. You anything else to add to this slot, Andy?
No.
Okay.
If you are.
Thank you. That takes us on to risk and the Portfolio Office Risk Log Tracker. Gillian.
Thanks, Chair. Gillian Buchanan from the Portfolio Office. Again, with the same as the dashboard. There's a cover paper that highlights any changes from the last time that you saw the risk report, along with the very complicated tracker. I'd just like to point out at this stage we talked about the new version of the risk log and transitioning over to the new corporate template. Andy's going to discuss that a bit further later on in the session, the private session later on, just to give you an example of what's happening. But the work's underway, and that new format will be reported to SMB in June. So the next time you see it, you will see the new format. So just to give you a bit of reassurance round about that piece of work. I'm happy to take any general questions, but if there's specific questions round about projects, I may need to defer to others. Thank you.
No, that's helpful. Thanks, Gillian. Any questions? Nope. Thank you. Very clear, and as ever, the highlighting is really useful in terms of being able to home right in on the changes. So thank you for that. Committee aligned directorate risks. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Paul Stewart, Director of Service Development. Thanks for that, Chair. The paperwork has been submitted within the pack, and of course we do have our specific spotlight risk this afternoon, or sorry, in the private session, so I won't say anything about that at this stage. And if you're okay, Chair, I'm happy just to open it up for any questions or thought processes as opposed to going over or through the document.
Yep, no, that's absolutely fine. Any comments, questions for Paul? Nope. Pretty clear and straightforward, I would say. Thank you for that. Which takes us on to the risk spotlight, resource and capacity. Are you planning to do that just now?
I wasn't intending to, Chair. I think it's in the private session.
Yep. Okay, that's fine. Apologies. Agenda's not quite right. So we'll cover that in the private session. And that then takes us on to the forward plan, which is, I think, self-explanatory. Has anybody got anything they spot missing or inaccurate in the forward plan?
Yeah, you wanted a reminder of the review of actions. So it went from item 12.2 to 13, which is a review of the actions.
Yeah, I haven't done 12.2 yet.
My apologies, Chair. I'm getting ahead of myself. I shall have a word.
Over enthusiastic, but thank you. Right, we'll take the forward plan as read, and items for consideration at future IGF board and strategy day meetings. I think there is something around the perhaps prioritization that we need to be thinking about going forward, and that comes off the back of several of the conversations today, but more specifically the stuff around PTFAS and the scale and complexity and the resource challenges that we talked about right at the start of the meeting, and is kind of a thread through a huge number of the projects. So that would be something I would flag. Has anybody got anything else they would like to add for items for consideration? No, lots of shaking. Review of actions. Nick will be delighted to hear. Heather, how many? Well, can you run through what you've got, and I'll check my notes as well, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I've noted 3 actions. So against agenda item 8, the value added statement, amendment to the word assurance.
Yep.
Agenda item 9.1, the youth volunteer scheme evaluation report, and Ali Perry's undertaken to look at what more can be done under the institution banner.
Yep.
Item 10.1, internal audit report 21-22 portfolio office, and a copy of the internal audit report will be circulated to the committee once it's available and ready for the ARAC.
Yep, that marries up exactly with the actions I'd noted. Anybody spotted anything we've missed? No? Excellent, good.
Sorry, Fiona, could I just chip in?
Sure.
I may have misheard, but just for absolute accuracy, it's anchor institutions is the expression. as
Yep.
distinct from just institutions. I think I just heard institution, but it's anchor, as in, you know, ship's anchor. Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, Heather.
Great, thank
Yep.
you. Yeah, captured that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Right, date of next meeting, Thursday, the 11th of August. And that takes us into the private session. We're on the same link, I think, Heather. So can you just watch and then give me the nod?
Fiona.
Oh, it is a different link.
It's a different link, yeah. If we leave this
Right.
meeting, go into a new
Okay.